All right, let's kick off another deep dive. Today we're looking at something pretty fascinating. The connection between our brains, how we view justice, and, happiness.
Sounds intriguing.
It is, right? So we're going to be taking a deep dive into this article. It's called Cerebro, Justicia y Felicidad,
Okay.
which translates to, you guessed it, brain, justice, and happiness. It's written by neurobusiness expert MAIS Pereira.
Ah, I've heard of her.
Yeah, she's got over 40 years of experience in this field. And her take on how our brains are basically wired for justice. Super interesting.
Yeah, the whole idea that our sense of fairness can impact, well, everything really, not just our emotions, but also how happy and successful we are. It's pretty powerful stuff. And from what I know of Pereira's work, she really gets into the nitty-gritty of the science behind it.
Absolutely. And she kicks off the article with this idea that, get this, our brains basically have a default stranger danger setting.
Stranger danger. Makes sense though, right?
Right. She explains that as humans, we're just wired to see anything unknown as a potential threat.
Well, yeah, think about it from an evolutionary standpoint. If you're one of our early ancestors, being wary of strangers was probably a good way to, not get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or something. So that instinct is probably still pretty strong in us today.
Makes you think, huh? Like, are our brains always sizing up situations, constantly trying to figure out how much we can trust the people around us?
I think so. It's like our brains are always running these subconscious calculations in the background. But here's the interesting thing. While we have this built-in caution, we also crave connection.
Right. We're social creatures. We need those connections.
Exactly. Social connection is crucial to our well-being, and there's even a hormone involved.
Oxytocin.
Oxytocin, right, the cuddle hormone.
Yeah. When we feel connected to others, when we feel like we belong, our brains release oxytocin, giving us that sense of warmth and, well, happiness.
It's like a biological reward for being social. Exactly. But what's really fascinating is how Pereira links this to justice. She says that when we're treated fairly, it triggers that same reward system in our brains, just like when we get recognition for our efforts.
Oh, interesting. So it's like our brains are saying, hey, being treated fairly feels good.
It does. Think about it. When someone treats you fairly, you feel validated, respected, like you're a valued member of the group. And for our ancestors, feeling like you belong to a group that would treat you fairly, was crucial for survival.
Because if you were on your own, well, good luck out there.
Exactly. So that sense of belonging, that sense of being treated justly, it's not just about feeling good, it's about feeling safe and secure. And that feeling allows us to, focus on contributing to the group and not constantly worrying about being taken advantage of.
Makes perfect sense. But then what happens when we experience injustice?
That's when things get a bit tricky. Because injustice disrupts that feeling of safety. It puts our brains on high alert, triggering a stress response, almost like we're facing a physical threat.
Wait, so our brains actually perceive unfairness as danger?
In a way, yes. Our limbic system, the part of our brain that handles emotions, it basically goes into overdrive. This can manifest in all sorts of ways. Anger, resentment, even a desire to retaliate.
Sounds familiar.
Right. It's like that fight or flight response we all hear about. But instead of running from a predator, we're dealing with feelings of betrayal or being wronged.
Wow, so it's not just in our heads, it's like a full-body response.
And the worst part is that this response can linger for days, sometimes even longer, according to Pereira. It keeps us on edge and affects how we interact with others. Some people withdraw, some lash out. It really impacts us on a fundamental level.
So if injustice can have such a lasting effect on our brains and our behavior, what are some of the ways this plays out in our everyday lives? How do we actually experience injustice?
Well, Pereira points to unmet expectations and broken agreements as major culprits. Think about it. When someone breaks a promise or the rules change without warning, it leaves us feeling like the rug's been pulled out from under us, especially if those agreements or expectations are, pretty central to how we navigate our lives, whether it's at work, in relationships, or even just in our daily interactions. It can really shake us up.
Absolutely. And Pereira also emphasizes that everyone's experience of injustice is going to be different. What might feel deeply unfair to one person might not even register with someone else.
So it's not always about the objective facts of a situation, but about how we perceive those facts through the lens of our own individual experiences.
Exactly. And this highlights the importance of empathy when we're dealing with issues of justice. Trying to see things from another person's perspective, even if we don't fully agree with them, can make a huge difference. I love that. It's about understanding rather than judging. But if we know that injustice can impact us so deeply, how do we actually create environments that are fairer? Where do we even begin? I mean, it's like you said, we hear so much about creating a positive company culture, but Pereira's take on this really stands out. It's not about the free snacks or the ping pong tables, you know. She's saying that a culture of justice, like that's the real foundation for a thriving workplace.
Absolutely. It's about creating a space where everyone feels like they matter, like they're seen and heard and valued. And I think Pereira's idea of calibrating expectations is such a great place to start.
Calibrated expectations. Okay, tell me more about that. What does that even look like in practice?
Well, it really comes down to communication, like crystal clear communication from day one. Everyone needs to be on the same page about what's expected of them, what success looks like, and what happens if things go wrong, the consequences. And it's about setting those expectations together collaboratively and making sure they're applied consistently.
So it's not just about having rules. It's about making sure everyone understands those rules and, more importantly, that those rules are actually enforced fairly across the board.
Exactly. Because when people feel like the rules are arbitrary or that they're not being applied fairly, that's when those feelings of injustice start to creep in. And that can really erode trust and create a toxic environment.
Oh, for sure. It's like that rules for thee, but not for me situation. Nobody likes that.
Pereira also suggests that it's important to actively seek input and opinions from everyone, not just during, times of crisis or when things are going wrong. Like, make it a regular practice. This ensures that people feel heard, like their opinions actually matter.
Right, like they're not just cogs in a machine. They have a voice.
Exactly. And when you do that, when you make people feel like they're a part of the decision-making process, you're more likely to get buy-in. And honestly, you often end up with better decisions overall. Because when you have multiple perspectives at the table, you're more likely to catch potential problems and come up with more creative solutions.
Totally. More brains are better than one, especially when those brains feel empowered to speak freely. Now, I also remember Pereira talking about the importance of gathering information when faced with a potential injustice, like really understanding the situation.
Oh, that's crucial. Don't just go with your gut feeling. Take the time to get all the facts, to understand the different perspectives before jumping to conclusions. She even suggests bringing in outside experts or conducting what she calls an carreira if necessary.
A carreira. Wait, I feel like I've heard that word before, but what does it mean again?
It's a Portuguese legal term. Basically, it means bringing all the parties involved together so they can each present their side of the story. It's about making sure everyone has an equal opportunity to be heard and that you get a complete and balanced picture of the situation before making any judgments.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So it's like creating a safe space for dialogue where everyone feels comfortable sharing their perspective without fear of, being punished or ridiculed or something.
Exactly. And this can be incredibly valuable in de-escalating conflicts and helping people see each other's point of view. It shifts the focus from blame and accusation to understanding and empathy.
It reminds me of those restorative justice practices,
Yeah.
where the goal is to repair harm and rebuild relationships rather than just punish the wrongdoer.
Pereira's approach definitely has that same spirit. It's about recognizing that justice isn't just about cold, hard facts. It's about understanding the human impact of our actions and decisions, how they affect people on an emotional and relational level.
This deep dive is really highlighting how much work goes into creating a just environment. It's not passive. It takes constant awareness, clear communication, and a real willingness to listen and adapt.
It does take effort, but like Pereira says, the rewards are huge. Remember, a sense of justice isn't just about avoiding negativity, it's about actively promoting positive emotions, creating a workplace where people feel truly valued and respected, and ultimately that's going to lead to better motivation and better performance from everyone.
It's about tapping into that intrinsic motivation, right?
Mhm.
The motivation that comes from feeling like you're a part of something meaningful, like your contributions are actually valued and your voice is heard.
Exactly. And this brings us back to, the fascinating world of neurochemistry. Remember we talked about how justice is literally wired into our brains? Well, Pereira specifically highlights the roles of serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin in how we experience fairness.
Oh, yeah. So it's not just some feel-good concept. There's actual science behind it. Yeah. Give us a little refresher on how these brain chemicals play into this.
Sure. So serotonin, that's often associated with feelings of happiness and well-being. And when we experience justice, when we're treated fairly, our brains release serotonin, which basically reinforces those positive feelings and contributes to a sense of, contentment and overall happiness.
So basically, being treated fairly makes us happier, literally on a chemical level. Who knew?
Then there's dopamine, which is all about reward and motivation. When we're treated fairly, our brains give us a little hit of dopamine, making us feel good and encouraging us to, seek out more of those positive experiences.
It's like our brains are saying, hey, this fair treatment thing, I like it. Let's do more of that.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's oxytocin, which we've already touched on. It's the hormone that plays such a crucial role in social bonding and trust. And when we feel a sense of justice within a group, it strengthens those bonds and contributes to a sense of belonging.
It's like that feeling you get when you know you're part of a team, a real team, where everyone has each other's backs. You feel safe and supported.
Precisely. And for Pereira, the presence of these neurochemicals, it really drives home the point that justice isn't just some abstract idea. It's deeply rooted in our biology. We're literally wired to seek out fairness. We're wired to thrive in environments where justice prevails.
It's like science is catching up with what we've always known deep down. Fairness matters. And not just for our emotional well-being, but for our relationships, our productivity, everything.
And speaking of thriving, Pereira also talks about the importance of empowerment in creating a just environment.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
If you feel powerless, like your voice doesn't matter, you're much more likely to feel unjustly treated, even if the situation itself isn't inherently unfair.
Right. Empowerment means creating a space where everyone feels safe to speak their mind, to share their ideas and concerns without fear of being punished or ridiculed. It's about fostering open communication and valuing different perspectives.
So it's about striking a balance, right, between having clear boundaries and expectations and creating a space where people feel comfortable pushing back, voicing their concerns, and offering their ideas.
Exactly. Pereira emphasizes that this sense of empowerment also means having clear rules and expectations that apply to everyone equally, no matter what their position or status is.
Okay, so it's about creating a level playing field where everyone knows the rules of the game and knows that those rules will be applied fairly. No favoritism, no double standards, just clear, consistent expectations for everyone.
That's exactly it. And this creates a sense of predictability and stability, which can actually reduce anxiety and foster a sense of security. And as we've talked about, that feeling of security is essential for promoting a sense of justice and well-being.
It's about trusting that the system is designed to be fair and impartial. It's not about who you know or what connections you have. It's about knowing that the rules apply equally to everyone.
Pereira also makes a great point about how true empowerment goes beyond just having a voice. It's also about ensuring that everyone has access to the resources and opportunities they need to succeed.
Okay, so it's about leveling the playing field, not just in terms of rules and expectations, but also in terms of access and support.
Exactly. It's about creating an environment where everyone has a fair shot at reaching their full potential.
And when people feel genuinely supported and empowered, they're more likely to, give it their all, to work collaboratively towards shared goals. And ultimately, that benefits everyone involved.
It's a win-win. You create a more just environment, and everyone benefits from the increased motivation and collaboration. Now, going back to what we were talking about earlier about how our brains go into high alert when we experience injustice, that fight or flight response, can we actually train our brains to react differently? Like, can we learn to manage those instinctive reactions?
That's a great question. I mean, it feels so automatic, like if someone wrongs us and boom, we're flooded with anger or resentment. Can we actually change that?
Well, Pereira suggests that we can, actually. She talks about how we can train our limbic systems to avoid those impulsive reactions to perceived injustices.
So it's like learning to hit the pause button on those knee-jerk emotional reactions, to give ourselves a moment to process the situation before reacting.
Precisely. It's about creating that space between the stimulus, the perceived injustice, and our response to it. That space allows us to choose how we want to respond, rather than just reacting on autopilot.
Okay, that sounds great in theory, but how do we actually do that? How do we train our brains to be less reactive?
Pereira suggests practices like mindfulness and meditation. These techniques help us become more aware of our thoughts and emotions as they arise, allowing us to observe them without judgment.
So it's about becoming more attuned to what's happening inside us, like recognizing those early warning signs that we're about to spiral into fight or flight mode.
Exactly. And once you can recognize those triggers, you can start to develop healthier coping mechanisms. And alongside mindfulness, Pereira also emphasizes the importance of cultivating empathy.
Empathy, that ability to truly see things from another person's perspective, even if we don't agree with them.
Yeah, exactly. It's not always easy. It takes effort and a willingness to really challenge our own assumptions and biases, but it's absolutely crucial for creating a more just and compassionate world.
Because when we can understand where someone else is coming from, it's harder to, write them off or dismiss their experiences. It opens the door for real dialogue and connection, even when there's disagreement.
That's the key, that connection, building bridges instead of walls. It's about recognizing our shared humanity, even in the midst of conflict. And on that note, Pereira also highlights open communication as another essential tool for promoting justice.
Right, open and honest communication.
Yeah,
That's got to be the foundation for any healthy relationship, right? Whether it's at work, at home, or in our communities.
absolutely. Open communication builds trust, it helps us resolve conflicts, and it ensures that everyone feels heard and understood. And that feeling of being heard and understood, that's crucial for fostering a sense of justice.
It's about creating an environment where people feel safe to express themselves honestly, without fear of being judged or punished.
Exactly. And remember, open communication is a two-way street. It's not just about speaking your mind, it's also about listening. Really listening to what others have to say, even when you don't agree with them.
It's about being willing to engage in genuine dialogue, to truly understand another person's perspective, not just waiting for your turn to speak.
And it's about recognizing that everyone's perspective has value, even if we don't agree with it. We can learn from each other, even in disagreement. That's the beauty of genuine dialogue.
Pereira's approach to justice really seems to emphasize collaboration and understanding. Like, it's not about winning or losing, it's about working together to find solutions that work for everyone.
Exactly. It's about moving away from that us versus them mentality and embracing a more collaborative approach, working together to create a more just and equitable environment for everyone.
And it's about recognizing that we're all in this together. Like, we're all part of the same system, and our actions have a ripple effect. Working collaboratively is the most effective way to create positive change.
Couldn't agree more. Now, I want to circle back to something we discussed earlier, the impact of injustice on our physical and mental health. Remember how we talked about how it triggers that stress response, releasing cortisol into our systems?
Right. It's not just about feeling bad emotionally. It actually affects us on a physical level.
Exactly. And chronic stress, especially when it's fueled by ongoing feelings of injustice, can have a serious impact on our health. We're talking about increased risk of things like heart disease, high blood pressure, weakened immune systems, even mental health issues like anxiety and depression.
Wow, so it's really not something to be taken lightly. Addressing injustice isn't just about creating a more harmonious environment. It's also about protecting our well-being, our physical and mental health.
Absolutely. Pereira actually suggests actively incorporating stress-reducing practices into our lives, especially when we're dealing with difficult situations.
So things like exercise, spending time in nature, listening to music, practicing relaxation techniques, even just creating a dedicated space for yourself where you can decompress and practice self-care. All of that plays a role in mitigating the negative effects of stress.
It does. And she also stresses the importance of seeking support from others, whether that's confiding in a trusted friend, seeking professional help, or connecting with a support group. Reaching out for help when you need it can make a world of difference.
It's so important to remember that we don't have to go through these things alone. There are people who care, people who understand, and resources available to help us cope and heal.
And Pereira also reminds us that we're not alone in our fight for justice. There are so many incredible individuals and organizations out there working tirelessly to create a more just and equitable world. It's inspiring, really.
It's so encouraging. It's like a global community of change makers, all dedicated to making the world a better place.
Exactly. And each one of us has a role to play in that movement.
Well, this deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening. It's clear that justice isn't just a nice-to-have, it's essential. For our individual well-being, for the health of our communities and organizations, for everything.
I agree. Pereira's insights provide such a powerful framework for understanding how deeply interconnected justice is with our biology, our emotions, and our ability to truly thrive.
And it's a call to action. It's a reminder that we all have a responsibility to actively cultivate justice in our own lives and to challenge injustice wherever we see it.
Because even small actions can make a difference.
Absolutely. Each act of fairness, each gesture of kindness, each effort to understand and empathize with others, it all contributes to building a more just and harmonious world. And as we've learned today, creating a culture of justice isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. It's good for our souls, our brains, our bodies, and our communities.
Well said. And a huge thank you to Marinés Pereira for her insightful article and for reminding us of the transformative power of justice.
To our listeners out there, we encourage you to really reflect on Pereira's insights and consider, what steps can you take to create a more just and equitable world, starting right where you are, in your own sphere of influence?
Remember, even small acts of fairness and kindness can have a ripple effect, creating positive change that extends far beyond ourselves.
Until next time, keep seeking justice, keep spreading kindness, and keep diving deep.
Okay, so we're back, and I think one of the things that really struck me about Pereira's article is how she challenges some of those traditional ideas about motivation, especially in the workplace. Like, what actually makes people want to do their best work?
Right, right. She makes the point that companies often focus too much on, I don't know, like external motivators, things like bonuses or fancy perks.
Yeah, like those might work for a little bit, but it's not really a sustainable strategy, is it?
Exactly. Pereira argues that those kinds of things, they miss the mark because they don't address that deeper human need for, fairness and recognition, like
Yeah.
real, authentic recognition, not just a pat on the back or a gift card.
Yeah, it's like trying to motivate someone with like a shiny object. It might get their attention for a minute, but it's not going to create lasting engagement or a sense of fulfillment. Right. Pereira really emphasizes the need for companies to shift their focus. Instead of just trying to control behavior, she says they need to create a culture of justice.
Okay, so less about do this or else, and more about creating an environment where people feel intrinsically motivated to contribute
Hmm.
because they feel valued, respected, and heard.
Exactly. And Pereira argues that this taps into that natural human desire that we all have to be a part of something bigger than ourselves, to feel like our work has meaning and purpose, and to know that our contributions are actually appreciated and recognized.
And when people feel that way, I mean, their motivation goes through the roof. It's not just a job anymore, like they're part of something bigger.
Right. It becomes a mission.
Yeah.
And she also talks about, fostering a sense of community and shared values within an organization.
So it's like creating that sense of belonging, we're all in this together, working towards a common goal.
When people feel connected to their colleagues and they believe in the company's mission, it creates a powerful sense of unity and purpose. And in that kind of environment, they're more likely to support each other, to collaborate effectively, and even go the extra mile because they're invested in the collective success, not just their own individual success.
It's amazing how something as simple as feeling like you belong can have such a huge impact on motivation and performance.
It really does. It speaks to that fundamental human need for connection. We thrive when we feel supported and valued by the people around us.
And it seems like the companies that really get this, the companies that actively create that kind of culture, they're the ones that are going to attract and keep the best talent. And ultimately, they're the ones that are going to be more successful overall.
Pereira's point is that it's not just about doing the right thing, it's good business. Happy, engaged employees are more productive, more creative, and they're less likely to leave. So it really is a win-win situation.
So if we're talking about putting these ideas into action, what can leaders actually do? What are some tangible steps they can take to create this kind of culture, this culture of justice in their organizations?
Well, Pereira has some great advice for leaders, and I think the first and probably most important thing is leading by example. Leaders need to really embody the values of fairness and respect in everything they do, in their actions, in their interactions, in every decision they make.
It's that whole walk the talk thing, right?
Right.
Because people can spot a phony a mile away. If your actions don't match your words, no one's going to buy into this idea of a culture of justice.
Exactly. Leaders need to be consistent in their behavior. Fairness can't be something you just turn on and off when it's convenient. It has to be an integral part of who you are as a leader.
It's about integrity. It's about walking the walk. It's about creating a culture where everyone feels like they're treated fairly, consistently.
Right. And leaders also need to be proactive about addressing any instances of injustice that come up, no matter how small they seem.
So it's about taking those concerns seriously and taking action to correct the situation. It sends a powerful message that injustice won't be tolerated.
And it shows that you're truly committed to creating that fair and equitable environment for everyone.
It's about really listening to people's concerns, investigating those concerns thoroughly, and then taking appropriate action.
And Pereira also talks about creating systems and processes that actually support fairness. So things like clear guidelines for decision making, making sure that there's transparency in how decisions are made, and having mechanisms in place so people can actually voice their concerns without fear of retaliation.
So it's not just about individual actions. It's about creating a whole framework that promotes and supports justice within the organization.
And that framework, it needs to be evaluated regularly and adjusted as needed. Leaders need to be willing to listen to feedback, to look at the data, and to make changes when things aren't working.
It's not a one-and-done thing. It's an ongoing process of continuous improvement.
And that collaborative spirit, that willingness to work together to make things better, that's really what Pereira's approach is all about. Moving away from that top-down, I'm the boss, do as I say model of leadership, and towards a more collaborative, participatory approach.
So it's about giving everyone a voice, empowering people to be a part of the solution, to share their ideas, and to work together to create a more just and equitable environment.
And I think Pereira gives us a really solid roadmap for how to do that.
This deep dive has really given me a lot to think about. It's clear that justice isn't just some abstract concept. It's essential for all of us, for our own happiness, for our well-being, and for the health and success of our communities and organizations.
I completely agree. Carrera's insights really highlight how fundamental justice is to human flourishing, both individually and collectively.
And it's a powerful reminder that we all have a role to play in creating a more just world. So, to our listeners out there, I hope you'll take some time to reflect on Pereira's ideas and consider, what actions can you take to create a more just and equitable world? What can you do, starting right now, in your own sphere of influence?
Because even those small actions, those seemingly insignificant acts of fairness and kindness, they can create a ripple effect that can lead to real, lasting change.
Absolutely. And as we've learned today, creating a culture of justice isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. It's good for us, it's good for the people around us, and it's good for the world.
A big thank you again to Marinus Pereira for sharing her incredible insights and reminding us of the power of justice.
And to all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep seeking justice, keep spreading kindness, and until next time, keep diving deep.